Welcome. Welcome to the Ripples podcast. If you're listening to this, welcome to the YouTubes if you're watching us, and very much welcome to the dozens of people who are joining me for Glimmers of Hope, Sparks of Joy. This is Paul Wesselman, the Ripples guy. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is a regular feature of the Team Ripples Patreon community. Patreon's a website that allows creators like myself to gather together supporters who are interested in pitching in a few bucks a month to help support the work we do. And the 200 or so Ripplers that pitch in money cover all of the costs for sending out ripples every month, for hosting several websites that allow us to put off stuff. They pay for my health insurance, and they leave a little budget on the side for me to print up really cool, fun, Ripley things that we are going to get as a result of our talk today. I like to start with a couple here now breaths to get centered. So I'm just going to take a couple deep breaths in, and I'm going to think the word here, and exhale and think the word now. And I'd like to start with a poem by Donna Ashworth. Joy does not arrive with a fanfare on a red carpet strewn with the flowers of a perfect life. Joy sneaks in as you pour a cup of coffee, watching the sun hit your favorite tree just right. And you usher joy away because you are not ready for her. Your house is not as it should be for such a distinguished guest. But joy, you see, cares nothing for your messy home or your bank balance or your waistline. Joy is supposed to slither through the cracks of your imperfect life. That's how joy works. You cannot truly invite her. You can only be ready when she appears and hug her with meaning, because in this very moment, joy chose you. That poem was called Joy Chose You by Donna Ashworth, and I will pause here and put the link in the chat window. And I will be continuing to do that here with live. And for folks listening and watching, if you look, there should be a Google Doc that has all the resources that I'm sharing today. Traditionally, when we hang out in these monthly Zooms, we follow the same format that our weekly Ripples email have. We have a pebble and a boulder and a ponder. In our weekly emails, of course, those are two quotes and something to think about for the week. In here, a pebble is a resource, a boulder is an activity, excuse me, that I'm using in my work or in my life. And the ponder is the meat of our content, which is today glimmers of hope and sparks of joy. And I'm really excited. Where did I put my um, the Pebble is actually a resource that one of the fantastic Ripplers, who's also a Team Ripples Patreon member, shared with me. And it's something her sister had shared with her just a few weeks ago from an organization called Action for Happiness. And they do these monthly calendars every month. And I just put a link in the chat window. Again, if you're listening to the recording, if you open up the doc, you should have all these links on your computer as you're listening or watching, unless if you're driving, focus on the road. Um, and if that link I just gave you, if you just click on the optimistic October one, you'll see this little calendar pop up. And it just has these little tiny daily suggestions. And if you're not able to see the links, I made this really big here just so you could get an example of these little treats. And what I love about this calendar, I'm opening it here real quick on this computer. I was looking at today's. What does today say? Take a small step towards positive change you want to see in society. So it just has these little tiny little suggestions, which is right up our alley of what we're exploring today with glimmers of hope and sparks of joy. And some of you know that I'm sometimes hesitant um, about stuff that is focused on happiness. I find that happiness works as better as a byproduct rather than a primary goal. But I'll tell you, when I looked around at these Action for Happiness folks, I was thoroughly impressed with how substantial their work is, and they have these 10 keys they focus on. Whoops, I don't think I have my computer open wide enough. There it is, 10 keys. Um, they focus on these 10 areas: giving, relating, exercising, awareness, trying out, direction, resilience, emotions, acceptance, and meaning. And that's a very substantial path to happiness, in my opinion. And they've got some good research-based ideas they share as well. So if you would like, check them out a little bit. And I think they're a great companion to our journey this month with Glimmers and Sparks. So that's our pebble. The boulder is something that I have shared that actually we sort of invented in these Zooms back at the beginning of the pandemic. And I didn't have a name for them, and I've been lately describing them as NLH scores. And I'm going to ask you, if you're taking notes on a piece, if you're handwriting notes, I'm just on a corner. I'm going to have you scribble something down here in a second. If you're taking notes at the computer, you're just going to jot something down. And if you're not, that's okay too. But what I'd love to ask you right now is, on a scale of 1 to 10, if we were just rating your energy and mood right now, or right before you got on the call, 10 being really high, like you're feeling really good, your mood and energy are high, and 1 being in the dumps, ask yourself, what am I right now? And write down a number. And yes, you can use fractions or decimal. You can use any number that you want between 1 and, let's say 0 and 10, because 0 should be an option. I'm going to participate. Next to it, I'm going to have you write a couple of numbers with a dash between them in parentheses, and I'll show you. I'm going to ask you to write the lowest number on a scale of 1 to 10 that you've regularly hit in the last few weeks or months. Lately, what's the lowest number that has visited you regularly? And then dash, what's the highest number that has regularly visited you? Um, I think, well, that wasn't regular. All right. Is that readable? I think so. So my numbers I wrote down is that right now I'm a 7, a solid 7. I could probably go to 7.5. And the lowest number I've regularly hit is 5. But if you had asked me a couple weeks ago, that number was more like a 3. And I would say that 8.5 has I've visited enough that I would claim that as my upper end lately. Now, I've hit 4 a couple nights ago. I've hit 9, but not regularly. So these are my now low high NLH numbers. I find that it was really helpful in the pandemic when we were checking in with each other to share the numbers. And by the way, if you'd feel comfortable, I'd love for you to type your numbers in the chat just so we can take a temperature of the room, so that we can kind of see where people are at. But I also think this is a useful activity just for yourself or your family or your staff meetings to get in the habit of explaining these to them, and then checking in with the people who maybe are reporting a little bit lower of a scores. NLH scores. And again, this is going to be on the document that I share with you all, but I'll just put in the directions how I explain this in the chat right now so you can have it there for you. Thank you. Excelinda, hello. Oh my gosh. Good to see you. I'm going to try not to acknowledge people because I'll start falling into chit chat with everyone. But we were just trading emails, so I had to say hi. Thank you for sharing all these numbers. I appreciate that especially some of your recent, the L number is really low for a lot of people. And I really appreciate you sharing that because I think it normalizes, number one, that you're not the only one. Lots of us are struggling in this moment or have been recently. I also think it's a good reminder that we can function at the lower end of this scale, I think, better than we tend to give ourselves credit for. And that's why, honestly, I thought about lowering my number to a 6, but I don't know. I felt guilty. Like I felt like, oh, I owe them at least a 7. But I've had a frazzly, poopily weird day today. And As much as it brings me joy to share some joy with you, it's been a hard one. And so I really appreciate you all. Look at all these numbers. Thank you, thank you. Oh, and I see some zeros. Thank you for using zero. I feel like um, it's worthy of being used when necessary. So use that if you would like, the NLH ratings. I want to keep us moving so we get to all our good stuff. Let's talk about glimmers and let's talk about sparks. Uh, this came to me. Let's move this little screen. So we're going to talk about what I mean by glimmers of hope and sparks of joy. So our time together here, I'm going to do a little defining what I mean when I'm talking about these, the upsides of them, and then the barriers, what gets in the way. And then I do want to spend just a little bit of time on our call today talking about how we find and create these. I'll tell you something that I didn't have Tuesday night when I gave this talk. I always like to have a single sentence that encapsulate what my talk is. And for whatever reason, I hadn't nailed that down. And this morning, as I walked with my pink notes from the walk, it came to me. I asked myself, what's the single sentence if we run out of time or if somebody says, what's your talk about? I spoke into I recorded it on my little watch. There are relatively small, relatively simple things that you can notice and that you can do that can have a significant and ongoing impact internally, your body, your mind, your spirit, externally, to your neighbors, to your community, to the world, um, that are in the areas of joy and hope and a few related emotions. And giving us, I think, specifically things to notice and things to do that can have an ongoing impact internally. You can feel better, you can do better. I really do think it's important to talk. We're going to talk some stuff about how this impacts our mental health, our emotional well-being, and our physical body and our spirit, our connection to that which is beyond us. But then these also have real impacts in the people around you that you encounter every day. I think society in general, and I really do think it affects the world. And so that's where we're headed. Glimmers, the term, popped up on my radar when I started seeing these little social media squares. And you don't need to be able to read if you're watching this, you don't need to be able to read what's up there. But this is a good example. I started seeing these things. I recently learned about a term called glimmer, this little social media meme said, which is essentially the opposite of a trigger. Glimmers are those micro moments in your day that make you feel joy, happiness, peace, or gratitude. Once you train your brain to be on the lookout for glimmers, the more these tiny moments will begin to appear. Now, I instantly went, yeah, I get it. That makes sense to me. Glimmer, the word seemed a little shimmery. It seemed, I don't know, it seemed a little plastic to me. Um, and these memes tended to look cutesy. And so I was intrigued, but I was skeptical. And I saw here, another one mentioned the word awe, and I love the concept of awe and wonder, and it's so basic in my life. I'm often on the look for awe, and I hadn't thought about its relationship to joy. And so I saw these, and I thought, well, I want to do some digging, and these memes seem to imply that there was like research that this was a legit thing. So I'm like, let's go find out. So trust the internet, right? Like anything you Google, it must be true. So I poked around, and it turns out that this counselor and researcher Deb Dana wrote a book in 2018, The Polyvagal Theory in Therapy, back at 2018, and she coined this term to be thought of as the opposite of a trigger. You and I feel certain you're familiar with the concept of triggering. We talk about it specifically. I'm most familiar with it uh, in post-traumatic stress. The idea that something triggers you, it might remind you of a past traumatic event. It might cause you to relive that as though it's present moment. And what we know that there's lots of research out there that when something triggers you, the reason we use that term is it's actually activating your sympathetic nervous system, or those terms I find confusing. So I tend to say S, sympathetic stressful. Your stress response gets activated. And your blood pressure goes up, your pulse goes up, you get on fight, flight, or freeze mode, and your body conserves energy, and you're like, ah. Well, Deb Dana was identifying these experiences where in her own life and when she was talking to people, where people seem to have these experiences that cued the opposite of the sympathetic or stress response and instead uh, activated the parasympathetic nervous system. So, this is the peaceful side that says, everything's okay. I'm part of the world. I have friends. Ah. And she thought that some of the research out there that's so focused on triggers, so focused on helping people identify the yuck, is that would it be useful to help identify this positive experience? And is there anything we can do to actually consciously, mindfully, purposely elicit them? And it turns out the answer is yes, that there are things we can do to notice things, which causes us to have this feeling, and then to actually do things, to take action. And so we're going to explore that. At the same time, when I was starting to dig into this and look around consciously and say, I want to see what's this glimmer stuff, I happened upon an article that mentioned uh, joy, micro acts of joy, and I was like, okay, that sounds different, but it sounds related. And this one article was about a project that, if you're familiar with the Greater Good Science Center, UC Berkeley has this amazing positive psychology, tons of research, puts out lots of publications, websites, emails, really good organization. And I had never heard of the Big Joy Project. And it was interesting that they didn't call it a typical it wasn't a typical research study. They called it, what was the term? A citizen science project. So they designed this 7-day challenge. And it's funny that I was well into planning our little joy scavenger hunt when I happened upon this. And I thought, well, maybe I don't need to recreate the wheel. I'll just do this and maybe I'll have everyone do this. And I recommend it. Ooh, let me quickly pause here and share a link. Big Joy Project. There's my link. And again, every article I'm mentioning, I have a link for because grad school, you always had to cite your work. But I highly recommend this Big Joy Project. It's 7 days. It's a little different than the one that we're theoretically going to be doing, that I wasn't going to talk about in this recording. Hypothetical joy scavenger hunt that we might do at some point. This had very specific, every day you got an email in the morning saying, this is your challenge for the day. Absolutely no pressure if you didn't do it. They still sent you an email the next day. But for all the ones you did do, it sent you a little report saying, this is what you reported you did. This is the impact it had. They measure a couple things in the morning and then in the evening to see which things had the biggest impact on your physical health, on your emotional health. And some of these folks, they did all kinds of deeper research on it. And so the statistic I put up here is a 25% increase in emotional well-being. But it turns out that if you look at both the science behind Glimmers that she wrote about, and that this Big Joy Project and micro acts of joy, there are a bunch of really practical upsides. And I'm just going to zip through some of these. Calming us down, eliciting positive emotions, even in the context of stressful events or sickness. Again, it's not about eliminating the yuck. It turns out that things can be weird, things can be hard, and you can experience these glimmers of hope, these sparks of joy. Centering, which can help us have a sense of agency. It can help us regulate our emotions. Cheering us up, increased feelings of hope, moments of fun or silliness. A really key one is connecting us, helping us feel connected to other people, helping us feel connected to nature, God, however you conceive things that connect us all, and also connecting us to ourselves, whether we think of it as our best self, as our authentic selves. And then, um, can you tell from this list, I fell in love with the letter C. I was like, ooh, we got to make this work. Clarifying, clarifying, helping us remember what's important, reminding us of what is most important in our day, in our values, in the big picture, if we're struggling with some things, or if some little things are distracting us and annoying us. Again, it's not about pretending they don't exist. It's about, oh yeah, this is a thing. What's really important is this. Curing literal physical and emotional impacts to improve our health, help us release chemicals that deaden pain, that build up our immune system. Coping in difficult situations. There was an interesting study on caregivers caring for sick loved ones, that taking a 5 week intervention where they learned some skills, that they were able to significantly tamp down anxiety. Were they able to eliminate anxiety and worry and burnout? No, but they were able to manage it a little bit, lower it down a little bit, make things seem a little more survivable. And this last word is what is so important: contextualizing. It is really important. The first thing we're going to cover on barriers is unrealistic expectations. And a lot of people might show up to something like this and think that this is something that if they do it, it can fix things. And I really want to point out that these are not, they can't fix all the yuck in our lives. They can't eliminate the yuck. They can't help you avoid the yuck. They aren't going to repair the yuck. They're not going to minimize the yuck even. They are going to contextualize, they're going to put it in a context. And I first learned this concept of how important contextualization is in the hospital room 4 years ago, 2017. Mysterious blood loss, awful situation, a lot of unknown. I'd lost a quarter of my blood. They couldn't find where it was. They couldn't find where it was going or when it was going to stop. And so I was stuck in the intensive ICU, and they wouldn't let me take they wouldn't let me take the medicine that really helps me with some really bad headaches that I get, migraine level headaches. And because my blood was going, they didn't want to thin it. And so I was stuck in a lot of pain and a lot of uncertainty. 2 o'clock in the morning, I do this Google search on my phone about pain management techniques. And a couple articles came up, and one of them had this interesting body scan where you just start at the top, go to the bottom. I've done a million mental body scans in my life. And it said, just notice all the places that you weren't in pain. And so I paused and I did it, and it was interesting. My memory was like it was a 7.58 level, really awful headache. And it turns out I wanted to put a drill into my head right here to drain the pressure that was right here. But even here was not in pain. And even here was not in pain. And my chin wasn't in pain. And so as I did the scan, there were a couple other places in my body that I was holding tension and I was feeling some discomfort. But a whole bunch of my body wasn't. And I was thinking that the strategy was a distraction, help you distract from your pain. And I go back to the article and it said, this isn't about distracting you from your pain or pretending like it's not there. It is about contextualizing it and helping you see that even when things are bad, even when pain is severe, it's not everywhere. And we're wired to notice pain. We're wired to worry. We're wired to be afraid. And so one of the things we have to do is get over thinking that those are bad things. What we need to get better at doing is contextualizing the yuck. And this is where Yum can help us. That's where Sparks and Glimmers can help us. And so unrealistic expectation is the first barrier that we just talked about. And the next one is that internal resistance that is inevitable. We are tired. What did I write down? We are busy, we are tired, we are forgetful, we are skeptical. Remember, I mentioned skeptical early. It is so healthy to be like, what is this stuff? Is this just fluffy and little, or is this real? And we do have a reason to be afraid and to worry. Our species survived by prioritizing worry and prioritizing fear. And there's a good chance that you made it to today because your fear response was activated at some really key times to alert you to be in a better state of mind to deal with a very real threat. And worry, to some extent, absolutely helps us problem solve, prepare for, figure out what to do. And so it's there. It's not going to go away. Now, another workshop, another time, we can talk about managing it and how much time do we spend doing that. But for here, I just want you to know it's an inevitable part of being human. And it isn't about trying to get rid of those for today. It's just about saying those are going to be some barriers, and there's some things we can do to keep on moving. The next thing on my list, which is out of order on my sheet, awkward and inauthentic. It is to when you start trying to practice something new, like, hey, I'm going to go try to spread some joy a little bit, or I'm going to try to do some activities. They sometimes feel fake. And I happened to catch on Facebook Reels uh, this guy that I had never heard of before that has started showing up because now I've started watching his reels. Vin Guyang, I believe is how he pronounces his name, and he's like a motivational speaker, personal development. He Lots of people watch his videos, and he often is. His videos are him on a stage with lots and lots of folks. So I wasn't as familiar with his work, but this was a Q&A period, and somebody was asking him. He had apparently, I'm taking some context here. Apparently, he had been giving them some instruction on how to use your voice and how to stand when you're presenting yourself so that you'll get more respect at work, in life, on stage, whatever. And this woman approached during the Q&A and said, "Does it feel fake when you're doing that?" And he took some time out and kind of took a little tangent. And one of the things he said is when you're trying out a new mindset or behavior, don't think of it as fake. Think of it as unfamiliar. You're not acting, this I reworded what he said. You're not acting like someone you aren't. You're rehearsing a future version of yourself that you are becoming. And that really struck me. When I watched it, I thought that's relevant to when we're practicing these glimmers and sparks. But I think it is true in so many areas that we're trying to a new behavior on, and because we take this doesn't feel authentic as a sign that it's not really us, and it might be, but it also might just be us being unfamiliar with something, and to think of it not as fake it till you make it, although I don't mind that phrase. I think sometimes you can fake it till you make it. But I think if you think of it as I'm rehearsing a future version of myself that I'm becoming, it's a little bit easier to say, this is authentic me. It's just newbie authentic me. And the next thing that I wrote, the word ephemeral came to mind when I saw something that the woman, no, it was in the the micro acts of joy article said, part of you knows that these won't last forever, that you won't always feel them. And then a part of you thinks, well, I don't know that I should count on something that isn't there all the time. And this is what I love. You can rely on something that is temporary. And then I thought of the word ephemeral. It's there all the time. Even if you can't always see it, it might not be present today, but you know it's going to come back. And it, I've had a couple, long story, it's not relevant. I've had a couple of hard moments in the last couple of days that I had moments of, the world is over. This is, my computer's not working right, and this is coming, and I got to get ready for this, and blah. And it really reminded me something we talk about with our feelings. Your feelings are overvalid. They're not always authentic. And feeling hopeless doesn't mean there's no hope. But this idea that even though I wasn't feeling glimmery or sparkly in that moment, I knew that between that moment and me getting on this call with you, that I wasn't going to have to fake it, that I would find it in me, and that I'd be sharing these ideas and remembering things, and that it was okay that I wasn't feeling it at 2 o'clock in the morning. And the last thing I want to mention before we talk a little bit about the how we do some of this stuff is guilt trips. And when I sent a reminder out last week, I invited you all, for those of you who are registered by then, I invited you, I don't know if you remember this, to share a couple things that you tend to take for granted that are good in your life. And let me pause here really quick and see, because I ended up putting them in a little Google Doc that may or may not inspire you if you would like to take a look at it. But I took everyone's name off it. I just gathered together all the things people said because not only did they have some good things on here, but some of the comments they made were really helpful too to talk about them. And um, this again, this is a form of joy and glimmer that's more about noticing things. It's not like what are things you do. This is more like what's going good in your life that you sometimes take for granted. And I said sometimes take for granted because I was really trying to get people to think of really kind of everyday normal things, not like the big special things, but just the everyday things. Here's what happened. Some of you wrote things like, here are some things that I unfortunately take for granted. So you had to like beat yourself up a little bit. Like, I know I shouldn't take these for granted, but I do. And then somebody else wrote something I should probably take for granted, something I probably take for granted more than I should. And here's what I want to say. I think it is a gift to be able to take things for granted. And it is true, it is 100% true that for me, one of the upsides to getting crippling migraine headaches is that the day after, and usually the second day after I have a really bad headache, I know exactly what non-headache feels like because I'm so aware of how the pressure isn't there. Some of you know last month we were talking about taking what I call non-hot showers, where I don't use any hot water. And I have found out, I've been doing this for a couple months, and I found out the water actually does get colder when the temperature is out. I thought, oh, I'm used to this, it's fine. Well, the water this morning, I swear to you, I'm pretty sure it had ice in it. I'm like pretty sure. But I will tell you that it helps me be aware of what warmth feels like when I have cold. And the other thing about taking things for granted is that our amazing brains, with the amazing processing power that we have, has a limited amount of focus. And if you try to force yourself to stay conscious of all the things in your life right now that are working, all the things right now that you like. Just as I look around this room right now, like look around your space, see some things that you're glad you have up on the wall. See some things that you're glad you own. This computer, this monitor, my water. My sweetie makes me water every morning. Hmm. My friend Sarah sent me a little cactus, a little card they'd send out at work about a cactus stretch. If I every moment was trying to keep aware. Oh, the Washington Department of Transportation gave me this cute little construction cone that I keep on. If I constantly felt pressure or an expectation to be focused of all of these things that I take for granted, number one, I would be this scattered in presentations all the time. I would not be able to focus. I would probably miss out some deadlines. I would miss things that I maybe don't want to focus on, but I need to focus on as part of adulting, of being a human being. And so I want you to let yourself off the hook. And part of what and when you do notice something good, don't turn around and beat yourself up because you don't appreciate it more. Several of you talked about how much you're appreciating just electricity. A couple people on this list lost their electricity in one of the big storms the last couple weeks. That can really do it for you. But just seeing it on the news, can make you say, "Oh, my lights are on. Yeah, these three things aren't working. Yeah, my kids are annoying the heck out of me. Blah 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 blah." And whew, it's nice to have electricity. But then don't add, but I should like not be upset about anything because other people don't. Don't That's not useful. And that's not how life works. Uh, Contextualizing, useful. Being aware, the first world problem, when people say, oh, this is a first world problem, I get the usefulness of contextualizing this problem. But I think using it as a, how dare I be upset about something because other people have it worse? That is not technically accurate. You're allowed to be upset about something, even if it's a relatively privileged situation. And it's not helpful to the people who are struggling even more mightily for you to avoid feeling some feels that you're having. Feel the feels. Let's talk about how we get to some more of these. In general, when I'm talking about any behavior, anything you're trying to improve, starting off with setting the intention. I would like to experience more glimmers of hope. And I use the phrase glimmers of hope, but glimmers is really about glimmers of safety, glimmers of gratitude, glimmers of a wonder, glimmers of awe, all these positive emotions and mindsets. And then planning to some extent. Remember that we're talking about noticing. I put on the screen finding and creating, noticing things, and then sometimes doing to create the joy for yourself or for other people around you. And I put the word plan because I think anytime you're trying to improve something, a little bit of planning goes in into the process. But don't let it bog you down. This is supposed to be little stuff. This is a sprinkling. We're most of us don't need to get a PhD in joy. We're talking about a non-credit continuing education course, a telecourse or like an online little telecourse. Hi, 1984 called. They want your term back. Oh, gracious. Um, but I think a little bit of planning at the start of the day or at the start of the week or just being a little more mindful about it can make things happen. A really big thing is just to be a little bit more curious, a little more observant. Because again, to contextualize some of these things, sometimes all you have to do is open your eyes and look around. And it's funny, on the Tuesday night session, I didn't take the tangents of saying looking around the space and seeing things that you like. Well, across behind just beyond this computer is a colored pencil drawing of where the wild things are monster that my first boyfriend drew for me. He was a fifth year senior at Bowling Green State University when I was a grad student. And he, on a night shift one night, he just doodled that because he knew I loved where the wild things are. And that would have been in 1989, 1990, I think the spring of 90. And yeah, it's still hanging there and I still love it. And I still think of him. And I hadn't looked at it in probably months. And there it sits. And it was awesome. Uh, and and so our ability to get curious and observant. And then the thing that I like next here, where I talk about trusting your impulse. How many times do we have an impulse to do a quick call or text somebody, and then we turn it into a chore, either like, oh, I don't know if I have time, or I don't have time to say all this stuff. And it turns out just saying, hey, I to somebody you haven't talked to in 2 years that you really owe a call, that you're feeling bad because of this, just saying, hey, I just thought of you today, and take a picture of something that reminded you of. This is a true story. A little, I can't believe I'm going to tell you tangent, but so I was doing my laundry on Monday morning, and I noticed that I have a lot of Calvin Klein underwear, and it is ridiculous because that is, I'm a Fruit of the Loom guy. And then I remembered that it was my friend Brian Miller back in 1995 at UW-Madison who really explained to me that you should spend a little extra and get Calvin Klein underwear because it makes you feel good. And I couldn't believe that over the years, I gradually believed him enough that I bought all these Calvin Klein underwear. I ain't lying to you. I can't believe I'm telling you this story, but I took a picture of a pile of underwear and I texted my friend Brian, who I have not talked to in years and years and years and years. And I said, thinking of you as I as I do my laundry, here's my pile of underwear. And it was so great because like 2 minutes later, he sent me this really sweet email. And he's like, by the way, I've been trying Tommy John underwear lately. And he sent me a link. And I looked at the price point and said, of course, there's another level of underwear to spend. I think I'm going to edit this out. I don't think I want to be. Plus, I just told you what kind of underwear my friend Brian wears. That is so inappropriate. I'm HR is calling on line one right now. It's so ridiculous. That's not, nowhere is that in the script, I swear. Here now, here now, here now. And finally, remembering and savoring. Are there little things that you do? Uh, Are there little ways that you can remember things? I use the Just Record app on my phone, but I'm able to press a button on my watch or my phone and just record something, and the little app transcribes it. And I have a morning staff meeting on my calendar every morning. Is a morning staff meeting, and my one of my first tasks is open the Just Record app and copy and paste the transcriptions. And I have a kudos file. I use Apple Notes, and I have a couple files where I just when things make me go, when articles make me go, oh yeah. And sometimes I never go back and click the article again, but I write down a phrase or I write down something. Sometimes I put the link and sometimes I don't. And doing that here and there does two things. One, just the act of saying, oh, this is worth capturing for a moment. Snap a quick picture, record just a few words. Oh, the sunset on October 17th was gorgeous. Actually, this morning, full moon or close to it on the walk this morning at a ridiculous 3:30 in the morning. I was up early because of you getting excited about this talk. And the moon was glorious. And I didn't, but I could have just said, oh, that big old moon on August 17th. And that becomes a thing. And again, it helps you savor the moment and it makes it a little more special to capture it. But then you got a list. And then when you're struggling, you got a little list of things. You got a little list of things you can show some other people, you can just keep to yourself. And making a habit of doing that. Don't turn it into homework that kills you. But what's a little thing that you can do? Wow, it's 45 minutes into our time together. We have had so much stuff in here. Um, let me close with a couple of things that that I scribbled down at the bottom of my page as I practice this presentation. Think about the balance between creating little sparks of joy, little acts, little things that you do for others and yourself, and just noticing. Keep it light, and I think that letting it be a game and not a homework makes it, I think it's the way to have it be the biggest impact for you. Yes, I'm done having you keep track of me. I know I'm wrapping up now. Balance doing stuff for yourself and doing stuff for others. There is a load of research that says that one of the fastest ways to feel better is to actually do something to make somebody else feel better. And that is tried and true. And there have been moments where I've been in deep despair, feeling very, when I say sorry for myself, I mean legit, I deserve it. Things are really bad. And my first thought is, can I spend 2 minutes right now lifting somebody else up? The problem with that piece of advice is that I'm talking to several dozen people who are extraordinarily good at serving others consistently and often. And you might be on burnout mode where you don't need to be turning outwards. You do need to be taking care of yourself. So find your right balance. Do a little in and do a little bit out. And the last thing I wrote was forgive yourself for not doing it more. This journey of joy, guilt trips are not on the journey of joy. And there's a couple of things I want to share once we wrap up our time with the folks who are with us live. But I think this is I like to keep these short enough so that people are on a little bit of a drive or walk if they're listening to the audio, or if they're watching the video, that their feet aren't getting tired and needing a break because they haven't stood up in a while. And a sign from my 57-year-old body. If I sit too long, I start feeling the little tingles in my feet. I'm like, oh gosh, I better get up. So I'll close by saying this. These are potentially homework assignments that I want you to not think of like that. I want you to think of this as whatever most intrigues you right now, whatever most excites you about this, think of it as a little sampler platter. And know that if you do nothing else, if just hanging out and listening to this, just being in a space today with 70 people, it says, that are on this call live, and the other people listening to this, if that lifts you up again a little bit, let that be the thing. And you don't have to do anything else. Just, it helped this moment. Now, if you do some stuff, I'd love to know about it. Find me on social media, respond to some email that I sent you, and let me know. If you subscribe to Ripples, you know that I read every single reply. and usually I'm able to respond. Sometimes it takes me a little while. And before we wrap up, I just want to say a quick shout out, a huge thank you to the people who are members of the Team Ripples Patreon community because the pandemic has cut the number of gigs I've had in half. It hasn't bounced back yet, and I'm doing just fine. I got enough pennies in the bank, and my model of doing ripples for 22 years was that I had 50, 40, 30. In the peak, it was 50, 60 gigs a year. For a long time, it was 30 gigs a year, made lots of money. And I was able to do all of the Ripple stuff, absolutely no charge, free to everyone, because these 30 gigs paid for it. And ever since that's been cut down a little bit, it's been so nice to be able to rely on these chunk of folks who are putting in 5, 10, some of them $25 a month to support Ripple. So if you're not a member and you want to be, we'll put the link. I'll be sending you the link. The last thing I want to say before we turn off the recording is to anyone listening is that just know that my world is so much better because I have you to bounce these ideas off of. I am an extreme extrovert, and I am telling you, every time I get done with one of these, I have a file with all of the Zooms that I've done since April of 2020 when we were first figuring this out. And I go back through these, and I have developed new content because of these Zooms. I have helped people out of despair and then said things and put things together that I've turned around and used for myself. And I feel richer for you being in my life. So with that, I will end our recording and hope to see you all soon.